9 Bizarre 80s Fashion Trends. Fashion is an ever-changing facet of our lives, and it will keep on changing for as long as people think of new ideas. There are many fashion items from the past that we still love and adore. But speaking of good fashion reminds us of the horrible ones as well. In particular, the horrible trends that the 80s brought with it. Hello and welcome to Retro Rome, where we'll refresh your memory about 9 of the 80s bizarre fashion trends that we're glad to see gone. Let us walk you through why the 80s fashion just didn't make any sense.
Squinch your hips in.
I am squinching my hips.
Squinch them.
Here are the top 9 most mind-boggling trends from the 80s. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button for more retro videos. Now let's dive into it. Starting our list with the least visually offensive trend, the acid wash jeans. Back in the 80s, acid wash jeans were all the rage. Who didn't have at least 4 pairs of acid wash jeans in their closet? Jeans have always remained popular in general, but in the 80s, you weren't considered cool if you did not have a pair of acid wash jeans. This is actually one of the trends from the 80s that saw its revival in our current era, in the form of the cutoff jeans. Acid wash jeans naturally transitioned into ripped jeans, which became extremely popular and resulted in all kinds of DIY disasters. With the exception of loose acid wash jeans, all jeans are acceptable, even the ripped ones. There are padded shoulders, and then there are the 80s shoulder pads, with number 2 on our list are the 80s bizarre wide padded shoulders for women. Think the 80s hit shows like Dallas and Dynasty, full of women associated with power dressing.
Sweet. Yes, that's what you are, Crystal. Sweet and vicious.
The most prominent silhouette in the 80s was upside-down triangle body shape. Add a big belt to it and a couple of earrings, and you've got yourself an office power suit. The 80s was an era where huge hairdos and broad shoulders were life goals. Most normal folks needed a little help to achieve wide-shouldered look. There were shoulder pads everywhere in jackets, blazers, and dresses. Everything you could possibly fit them into. Women in the 80s put pads on their jackets to make them look broader. Shoulder pads originated from a power outfit named Power Suit. For women in the business world, it was important to look as strong as their male counterparts, but the exaggerated power suit ended up making them look absurd and silly. Number 3 on our list is another absurd fashion, the popped collars. The 80s were strange times. Indeed, for the fashion world, not only did everyone feel the need to pop their collars in every possible setting, but they also made it a deciding factor for your coolness. If you did not have popped collars, you just weren't cool. The trend lasted a full decade, and at the end of the decade, it had morphed into an even more absurd form. At the end of the 80s, not only did everyone pop their collars, but they also wore several polo shirts underneath, so they can pop not 1, but 3, 4, or even 5 different colors at one time. Frankly speaking, it made everyone look horrible. Speaking of absurd fashions, number 4 on our list is the rara skirts. A short, flouncy, layered skirt that graced the closet of every teenage girl in the 80s. At that time, it was the height of fashion, and every single girl who was cool could be seen sporting one. It was a flouncier and puffier version of the traditional cheerleading skirt with as many layers as could be. The layers were either flat or puffed out like a tutu. Like every other 80s items on the list, there were an abundance of puffed up cloth and flouncy bits in the rara skirts. Women everywhere around the globe are no doubt glad that this tacky style is no more. Imagine wearing a tutu to your school. Actually, that's not a good idea. One of the most horror-inducing fashions on our list is at number 5, the leg warmers. 80s was a time where no one went to the gym or cared much about athleisure. Going to the gym for the fun of it as a pastime was practically unheard of, and so were the stylized gym clothes. So rare that the Fitspo squad from the 80s that did go to the gym were hell-bent on looking trendy while breaking a sweat. In the 80s, a standard jazzercise class was jam-packed with women in full makeup and uncomfortable spandex leotards and matching leg warmers. Apparently, the leg warmers served no purpose other than fashion. As far as fashion goes, this was decidedly one of the ugliest ones we've seen yet. Leg warmers were basically overly huge, shapeless socks that had two ends. Oh, and let's just not forget they were thick and warm, which would be okay if they were worn only in winters. But no, leg warmers were worn throughout the year. And another horror-inducing fashion item on our list that goes hand in hand with the previous one is at number 6, the spandex. Oh, the horror that spandex was. Spandex was one of the worst things about the 80s, aside from the fact that they had no practical use whatsoever. They also looked absolutely horrible on whosoever wore them.
What is this?
But somehow, some way, spandex lasted for an entire decade or more. Every single person in the 80s, especially working women and moms who wore spandex to the gym and other workout places. Aside from the fact that spandex itself is a horrible look that no one should ever wear, it came in all kinds of bright and eye-piercing neon colors. Pairing that up with a matching sweatband and leg warmers, no words can explain the horror. By now you all might have been cringing hard and thinking how the people of the 80s survived the era of eyesore fashion. But don't give up yet, there is more.
I swear to God, this has got to be a joke.
With number 7 on our list, the sweatband. As if leg warmers and spandex weren't enough, the 80s world of fashion decided to add sweatbands as a must-have item with leg warmers and spandex. For some reason, these sweatbands were worn straight across the forehead whether or not they were actually used to ward off sweat falling into your eyes. Any other outfit, whether it was formal or casual, sweatbands worked with every single outfit. All sorts of materials were used to make sweatbands, and no color was too daring or too bold. In what was decidedly the pattern for 80s fashion trends, more was always the best. Number 8 on our list is the squeen dresses. Somewhere along the start of the 80s, someone someplace decided that it would be a fine idea to make a whole dress out of squeens. While working on this idea, it dawned to them, why not add colorful squeens in the pattern?
What makes them brave even when they have no reason to be?
That was the start of squeened fashion. Women from the 80s flocked towards glittery monstrosity with joy. Every woman, from an ordinary one to a celebrity, wore squeen dresses quite frequently. The 80s have had a lot of bad ideas, but the worst of it was covering oneself in multicolored squeens and thinking that you look good. We wouldn't be sad at all if this style never made a comeback. Like every other person on the planet, you might have had an occasional bad hair day. But let me tell you about a bad hair decade, with number 9 on our list, voluminous hair. If we had to choose a slogan for the 80s, it would be without a doubt, bad hair, don't care. Everyone in the 80s, be it men or women, took great pride in perming hair and teasing them to new heights.
Okay.
And we mean that literally. Every hairdo was huge. The bigger, the wilder, the better. Hair was always big and wild. With great volume and extreme curls and waves, it would always be big and full of hairspray. No matter whether people wore their hair up or down, it would always be big and full of hairspray.
Little high, little low.
For men, the predominant look was the mullet. Every 80s man sported the mullet with great classy saying in mind. Business up front, party in the back.
I said it first, bro.
Well, I thought it first, Holmes.
In short, the hair was just big, wild, and crazy. And there you have it. Top 9 weird, bizarre, and outright horrible styles of the 80s. Was there anyone on the list that you think should be? Mention in the comments. Especially comment if there is any such bizarre 80s fashion we didn't mention. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on all things retro. Tuning out, Retro Rome.